Today is November 19th, 2018. I am interviewing Michael T. Shaw at the Butler VA Medical Center in Butler, PA. Mr. Shaw is 68 years of age and was born on October 28th, 1950. I am Chuck Jennings, the interviewer, and I am being assisted by Kurt Essman, the videographer. Mr. Shaw is a nephew of Merle T. Shaw, who was a lieutenant junior grade in the Pacific Theater until the time of his death. Mr. Shaw, this is the story that we can't present because of his passing in the Pacific. But we'll start out in 28th of May in 1918 when he was born. Could you go into where he was born at?
He was born in a small town in western Pennsylvania called Elderton, PA.
And did he go to school there too?
Yes, that's where he went to, both up into the high school.
But he was in a two-room schoolhouse.
Yeah, the two-room schoolhouse, right.
And they had, five grades in there, I believe.
Yes.
And after that, at grade 6 through 8, you got to go upstairs, it looks like.
Yes, yes.
And he finished high school in May of 1936. So from there, where did he go to?
Well, he went to Indiana State Teachers College. It's here in Indiana, Pennsylvania. And he studied in biology. He wanted to become a teacher, which he never did. He went on to the service then, after graduation.
Now, was he musically inclined at all?
Oh yeah, he could play the piano very well and some other instruments, but he played piano and sang. He played piano for our church and he sang for weddings, and there was another family there in town that they got together in the evenings and sang different times.
And, well, okay, so at some point, there's an incident about a bird in his class. Do you remember anything about that, the bird he brought home?
Yes, his sister talked about that. It was a part of his biology where he had to mount this bird for a biology professor, and he finished the taxidermy on it, but during the night he set it up on the piano and the cat got to it and destroyed it. So he took it into the professor the next day and explained to him what had happened, and he looked at him in silence and he just smiled. He believed Merle because it was unlikely that he could make up such a far-fetched story.
Also, Merle had something else going for him too, with his Model T his grandmother gave him. So what was he doing with that?
He was driving that, he used it for carpool. He'd drive it to college up to Indiana, which was about 20 miles for him. And when he lived on the farm. But at any rate, he used it to drive back and forth to college.
Now, as you said, he was looking for a career as a high school student teacher, or science teacher, I'm sorry, in biology. And what happened during the time he was in at college? Did he do any other activities or get involved in any other activities?
Well, in addition to singing and so on, he also joined what they called the ISTC, and that's a course that they held at the Indiana airport where he could, he was under instruction to learn how to fly. And that was called Indiana's Hamilton Field.
And basically he got his ground school there and did some flying?
Yes.
Somewhere, at some point, he did graduate college, and he looked to the military for going into. And I guess he enlisted in December 1940, and in Navy as a seaman second class. And at some point, he was went to Philadelphia Reserve active base for training. Now, from that point, what else did he do? He had ground school.
Well, yes, he, did you mention it was 1940 when he enlisted?
Yes.
Okay. Then in 1941, he became an aviator cadet, and in April of 1940, he transferred to Pensacola. And
Okay. He went to Philadelphia Reserve, the ground school, for eight and a half hours of training on an N3N, which is a double-seated cockpit trainer. Recommended flight training began on February 41. He reported to Jacksonville. So pick it up from that point.
I'm sorry, where were you at on that?
Jacksonville. He reported to Jacksonville in the morning of the 15th of March.
Yes, he reported to Jacksonville, and he made the trip from Philadelphia with some other members of his squadron. On the morning of March 15th, after ground school at Jacksonville, he was transferred to Pensacola on 16 April 1940. The orders were signed by Chester Nimitz. Merle barely passed his physical to become a cadet, just meeting a minimum height requirement of 5'6". One of his roommates at Pensacola, probably Barry Clay, had the same vertical problem at the other extreme, being 6'6". Their nickname is Mutton Jeff, but later Merle was dubbed as Junior.
Now, somewhere down during that period of time, he met Minnie. Go into that, how that happened.
Yeah, he met Minnie at, her name was Catherine, but they nicknamed her Minnie. He met her at school. She was a school teacher in Pensacola, and they came known to each other through a blind date situation, and in a short time they fell in love, and he bought her a ring, and they decided to get married after he returned from the service, the South Pacific.
Now, in November, he was made an ensign, and at Pensacola after his training, and he had 15 days en route to Norfolk at the point of the Japanese interruption on December 7th. So he was en route, and the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, was it? Or was he home?
Well, he was home on leave at that particular time, and In fact, his sister got message, she was just young. She run down to the neighbor's house where Merle was at and told him that about Pearl Harbor. So he knew, he geared up, and the next day he got orders to leave, as all leaves were canceled at that time. And my family got pictures of him standing in the yard back then in Elderton, Pennsylvania. And that was the last time his family ever saw him. And I have those pictures.
So he finally got to Norfolk on the 16th of December, and he reported to PV 71, which was a kind of a squadron that was going to be redeployed into something else. So go into that a little bit, what happened during that period of time at Norfolk.
Well, he got caught up in that VP 71 in Kaneohe, and for training and so on. And it was made up of 5 PBYs, and most of the guys from that squadron went on with him to VP 54 in the Solomon Islands later on.
And after he completed his training, he went to San Francisco and then Pearl Harbor, and caught up with VP 71, and they did some additional training in around Hawaii. And can you go into any of that training, what they did for that training period of time? Did they fly machine gun runs and torpedo runs and that kind of thing off Hawaii?
Yes, I'm trying to see it here.
They picked up their crew and were training basically on what the PBY was never intended to do. The PBY was intended to be a transport aircraft or a passenger aircraft for personnel, and they made it into an assault aircraft. So they the crews, they had to retrain and kind of got familiar with the aircrafts. And they, like I said, they did torpedo runs, they did gunnery, night navigation, and became familiar with that. And at that point, I believe they transferred over to Squadron 54 in the 15th of November of 42. Can you pick it up from that point?
He transferred to VP 54.
In December of 42.
Yes, December of.
And he was one of the only 4 pilots that came out of 71 who actually transferred over and got ready to go over to the Pacific.
Yes, that's what I mentioned a little while ago, that some of them came with him. And from November 42 to March 1943, they were given as much training permitted in gunnery, bombing, navigation, and communications and flight operations.
After all that was done, where was he going to be assigned to?
He would be eventually assigned to Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands, South Pacific.
Now, in the modification of the PBY, this is just a little historical note, the PBY 1, 2, and 3 had a door on the side. And that was due to, again, transfer equipment, men, and not till the 4 model came out did they include the anti-aircraft 50 cals on the aircraft. And they also mounted a twin 30 in the nose of the aircraft. The aircraft had a reputation by the pilots of 110. Could you go into those 310s?
Yeah, it was sort of a bad joke between the members of the crew and so on, that it climbed at 110 knots, cruised at 110 knots, and dived at 110 knots. It was designed more or less, as we said earlier, for passenger and cargo seaplane. They were meant to land on the open seas, pick up survivors, and then later on, as we talked about, they put 4 500-pound bombs under the wings, and they had 50 caliber machine guns in the 2 blisters of the aircraft.
And they carried torpedoes, depth charges. They were pretty much deployed in the Pacific and Atlantic for long-range patrols. They would be up for 13, 14 hours at a crack, and for both of the patrolling in the Atlantic and Pacific.
One thing we forgot to mention is that they painted them black back then because they were doing the night missions, looking for Japanese submarines and so on. So they were painted black.
They got a nickname for that, did they not?
They called them the Black Cats, yes.
And all the 3 logos have a Black Panther and different little signs for the 3 squadrons logos. Now, at some point, they put radar on board. Do you know how that worked at all?
I'm not exactly sure when they did it, but they had to, the radar was to locate Japanese ships and so on going up the slot, hauling supplies and so on into the islands.
The radar was like an oscilloscope with a line across it, and when it got close to a target, it would go up and down, and they could hone in on that target with that signal. You know, if they turned right and the signal went down, they know to turn left, and the signal would come back up, and that's how they would locate the vessels. Was off of like oscilloscope, for lack of better words. Speaking of the Black Cats again, because of the use they were originally used for, they put them as a kind of a stopgap measure. You know, they didn't have much to throw at the Japanese, and they used everything they could, and that's how the conversion of the PBYs got to be what they were, because they just, quite frankly, didn't have enough to go after the Japanese at Guadalcanal. So let's pick it up from at Guadalcanal. What do you recall, or what do you have letters from, and with the PBY 47, 9 planes and 10 crew left on the 1st of March, arriving at
Canton Bay, Island rather.
Yeah, Island, and
one of the things that they talked about in letters that I received, and also I've got to meet some of these guys at their squadron reunion one time in Las Vegas, and one of the pilots of Smith's crew, he said he had 136 pounds of melt pouch chewing tobacco on the plane when it was destroyed, and was grieving more of the loss of the melt pouch chewing tobacco than he was the plane. But James Smith had 6 bottles of whiskey aboard, and when they returned to Kaneohe to pick up another plane, he could only get 1 bottle. as a replacement. So they were disappointed about that.
So, they got shot down fairly regularly, it sounds like. So sometimes it looks like they would have to do repairs, and I'll go all the way back to Hawaii sometimes to get the repairs in, and if they didn't have the right stuff. So the Black Cat Squadron started their night patrols around the Solomon Islands. And the night of, we'll go on to the night of 12 March. Do you want to pick that up from there?
Well, the Black Cats, they arrived and relieved VP 12. The two squadrons operated jointly until June, when VP 12 withdrew from the area. And operations of VP 54 in 1943, that's when it was made up on the 1st of March to
15th of June.
the 15th of June. Yeah, that.
And they developed a defense plan for Henderson Field during that. Basically, they were doing defense of Henderson Field at that time, going after Japanese in the slot and any convoys that they could come across. And again, this was night patrols and on into the anti-submarine patrols, special weather flights, you know, on some of the missions, bombing, harassment, Japanese airfields that they would go after, and some of the transportation areas too of the Japanese. They would also conduct anti-ship patrols. Do you want to go into that, about the southern area of Guadalcanal?
Well, by that, they did anti-submarine patrols and special weather flights, rescue missions, bombing and harassment missions over the Jap-held airfields of Manda and Villa, and transporting officers and material to advanced bases.
They developed they were also going after Japanese supply lines based in the area.
Yes, that's right. They covered the channel, southern approaches to Guadalcanal. The track included the Russell Islands, the southern 2/3 of southwest coast of Santa Isabel, and the northern tip of Manila. That isn't right.
And Salvo Island. Let's pick it up from.
Did you cut that off?
Yeah, we'll cut that. And the northern tip of Salvo Island. So you can say that northern tip of Salvo Island. We'll pick it up from there. You can just
the northern tip of the Salvo Islands.
And the patrols, about 13 or more hours in the air at night, flights and stuff?
Yeah, their flights were long. They would fly up to 13 hours after they left Guadalcanal. And convoys and anti-submarine patrols were ordinarily flown to the southeast of Guadalcanal or between it and the Russells, the most advanced Allied base during this period. The drill ended 15 June 1943, by which time VP 54 was handling the area alone.
Now, at some point, they got transferred into another unit? Did they?
Well, the second participant in the first phase,
First phase allowed the PPAC soon arrived at Henderson Field. It took over the crew of Lieutenant Junior Gillett?
Jerky.
Evans tells that the crew one day information then he was leaving since he had been reported to the hospital. So you want to pick it up from the first phase, and then he's reporting to the hospital for malaria. Okay.
Well, the commander was Lieutenant Jerky. He's the one that he was leaving, and there would be a new commander come in about the middle of April 1943 is when Merle contracted malaria, and they said it was one of the worst cases in the whole squadron, according to Elliot Schrader, who is now PP-1P of Merle's flight crew, co-pilot. Living conditions at Henderson Field was certainly conducive to the element. You have to cut that out.
The conditions on Henderson Field were atrocious. Could you go into that a little bit?
Well,
Living in a tent?
there was poor drainage and surrounding it by undergrowth. And this was a rainy season. The men lived in tents, and mud was all over everything. And the only way to get out of the mud was to get onto your cot and remove your shoes. Mosquitoes were bad. During this period, 20% of the squadron had symptoms of malaria, and 35% suffered from dysentery.
Dysentery. And they didn't have any fresh food, you know, at that time. And could you relate about the tents and when the rain was in the tents and the bugs and the, do you recall that? Where
they had to wear rubber boots and
Yeah.
Raincoats and
the bugs would go up, as the water rose in the tent, the bugs would come in and then the rats would follow.
he made a slingshot and shot at the invaders, they called them, hitting a rat once, he thinks.
So they were living with bugs, rats, and mosquitoes. Now, what they issued them there at that time was rubber boots, a raincoat, a hat, and an alarm clock. But they really didn't need that alarm clock. Why? Why was that?
Because there was cows there, and they would moo in the morning and wake them up. They tried milking one of the cows one time without success. One of the high-ranking officers come in, and he was upset over the living conditions, so he ordered the Seabees to build a proper home and reported it directly when it was completed.
So the living conditions improved a little, not much. You still have malaria going rampant, dysentery, and other local diseases that you control, beriberi and all that kind of stuff. How often did they receive mail? And talk a little bit about that.
Between flights and relieved by mail call, they constructed a open-air movie facility with coconut logs for seats in front of the projector. The facility was named the Black Cat Bowl, and according to a photograph furnished by Willie Sneed, Horace Evans passed on the anecdote that the captain's tent was just off to the right of the screen, and social activities therein could be seen silhouetted on the tent wall.
Now, Shaw, yeah, his illness was severe. Now, he ended up in a hospital back in New Zealand. Can you go into that?
Yes, he did, as they said before, that he had the worst case of malaria in the whole squadron, and he was sent to Auckland, New Zealand for 30 days till he got over it.
At that point, on the 7th of July, there was a music book that he wrote some notes in. Can you go into that?
Well, he wrote 16 bars of in his book of music, and his friends referred to it as Shaw's Unfinished Symphony, and they're hoping it survived. The Unfinished Symphony has survived, but we've never heard it.
Back in the latter part of June, the 27th of June, about a week, his brother Frank he'd been back to work for 2 weeks. What was the story on his brother Frank?
Oh, that letter to his sister, Pauline, was Merle's sister. Frank was my dad, Merle's brother. And on 27 June, that he was back, he said that he was back on duty about a week. When his brother Frank verified in July that he had worked 2 weeks, I'm messed up on that.
Yeah, had been back to work 2 weeks. So Frank apparently didn't have a job or go to work. He was writing a letter and basically saying that Frank was back at work. Again, a letter from Minnie on the 13th of July showed that he had been back from the hospital for 4 weeks. And they were waiting to hear about his illness, were they not, in letters?
Well, yeah, they were. In Auckland, the doctors wanted him to return back to stateside after his illness. And he had been at Kaneohe Bay, Henderson Field, a total of 18 months. But he wanted to return to a squadron to complete his tour of duty.
And that until the second phase of the operation for the PBYs. And that was between June and August in support of the campaign. And Rendova and Murad. Can you pick it up from that point? It was the first combat illness, was 15th of July.
You mean the second phase of the operation?
Yeah, second phase of the operation. They was covering the Rendova operation.
And Manda
campaign. And the first combat fight after his illness was on the 15th of July, when his squadron commander,
Lieutenant Commander Carl Shainweiss was aboard. He went with them that night. On his patrol, he made contact with Japanese cargo barges, which he bombed and had no hits. Strafed and was hit by any anti-aircraft fire, for which he received an air medal for flights VP-54 from March 26th to July 22nd.
flying into deep enemy territory, night searches for convoys.
Yeah.
Now, Minnie was back home, worrying about her fiance And she went to Florida State College for Women. And just briefly, just touch upon that and, you know, what was going on in her life.
Merle wrote to her often, and he tried to, he told her he was going to try to learn how to speak Spanish. Perhaps he said they could sit around and talk Spanish with a loaf of bread and a jug of wine.
In front of the fireplace.
In front of the fireplace.
That was pretty risque writing back in that time. Shaw's crew flew 5 patrols, and between August 6th and to the 20th of August, and they were not credited with any of those patrols for some reason. In your research, did you ever come across why that was not put in their folder?
No, I never did.
Now, we will say the research that you've done is extensive, and you've done it for 20 years now. And you have massive documents, letters from Minnie, letters from the family, the complete forms from his time in the service, and numerous pictures of his time during the service. At this time, I really want to bring up his crew picture at this time. This was pretty much his crew. And do you know which 2 gentlemen were the survivors?
And Hank Evans here, lots of hair on Hank, and Brazil. His last name was Brazil. They're both dead now, but I did get to meet Horace Evans, or Hank Evans. And we spent a lot of time together, and I received a lot of letters from him.
In August, the 5th of August till the 31st of October, there was the Villa Villa campaign, and where the Japanese had to evacuate Colomba. Pardon the wrong termination of the word. And the reason that this was, they developed a new campaign that they used in New Guinea of leapfrogging some of the islands in the Solomon Group. So the Japanese would be running out of supplies if they didn't pull back and keep on pulling back, you know, because the Americans would be behind them. So they had to evacuate the islands. So then in the invasion of the 14th and the 15th of August, can you go into that with Shaw's crew? It was covering the sweep ahead for the 4th Marine Division.
Okay, for the leapfrogging, on the it was a flight which took off at 2200 hours on 25 August, and Shaw's crew was covering the sweep ahead of what apparently the 4th echelon of the Marines to be landed by the task force of DDs and LSTs. This took place at Simba Island and the north-south tip of Rendova was searched without making contact with this group, which was off the designated course and hours behind schedule. So at 03:30 the next morning, Shaw withdrew from the southern tip of Rendova and turned off his radar in order to send a weather report back to base. And usually, the planes were flying at 800 altitude at about 0400 in the morning, when suddenly the ships below, the ones he was looking for, opened fire, making several hits on the engines and fuselage, probably the task force he'd been sent to cover, which is Task Force 39.
Well, the reason they shot at him was when he turned his radar off and sent a weather report, he had to turn off his IFF, which is a signaling device that airplanes use to friend and foe signal. And if that IFF signal was not on, they considered them an enemy. And he
That's
sent
right.
his weather report. Just so happens he found what he was looking for, but in the wrong way. And they opened up. He lost an engine, bullets through the fuselage, and what happened with the starboard engine was shot out and continued on from that point.
Well, he landed, he got a message off to a PT boat squadron in Rendova, and he was starting to lose altitude, so he jetted all his bombs at
500.
500
Feet.
foot. They were still losing altitude, so they turned on what they hoped was a wind and managed to open sea landing at night on
On the one engine.
one engine, yes. Bouncing twice, the left wing floats came down and power was cut off to the port engine. The radio, the VHF radio was still operating, so they contacted a nearby PT boat squadron at Rendova, which demanded their identification code for the day. After a frantic search for the code book, they were able to identify and send their location, which was precisely near Japanese islands on Simba Island, towards which they were drifting, and the Japs had small arms only. They only had small arms. They were firing at them as they were drifting. The two PT boats appeared at dawn and attached a line to their plane and pulled them out to safety. This is the base that President Kennedy was assigned to also.
So what did they decide to do with the airplane?
Well, they pulled it out away from the island and they tried to sink it with their own guns. They, after they didn't want it drifting over to the island where the Japanese were.
Leapfrog strategy was not highly successful this first time because it did not have enough pressure. What is it, pressure? Pressure in the area to prevent the Japanese from. Before he was shot down, he had did some maintenance flight back at New Caledonia for maintenance. And at that time, there were some CBs repairing the area, you know, the field and things like that. And there was one CB who was quite good at watercolors. And can you go into that story?
And Nat Bellantone was his name. He was from Boston. And I located Nat in 1998. But he worked for the construction battalion on several islands, and he happened to be at the New Caledonia where Merle, my uncle's plane, was sitting. So he started to paint the plane sitting there, and Nat got up on a hill, and he really liked that picture, so he painted it. The plane was sitting there with the crew around it. He wasn't able to complete the picture when Merle took the plane out, but after the next day, Lieutenant Shaw, my uncle, come back to the same place, and Nat saw him, Nat Bellantone. He went out and finished the painting, so he took it down, and he wanted the skipper to sign it. And of course, the crew wouldn't let him there very long. They wanted to know why he wanted to see the skipper. So he showed them that watercolor, and they all got excited and said yes. They went and got Merle up in the cockpit, and they wanted Uncle Merle to sign it. So he did sign it, and I have, after I met him in '98, he gave me a picture of the original. This is a copy of the original painting. It was dated August 1943, and it's from the watercolor of what I called the Final Journey on New Caledonia. So it's a beautiful painting. And
Actually, I've seen that painting in some books referring that picture because he has some other pictures in some other books, historical books. But I have seen that picture in historical books. Now, once he completed that task, where was he off to from that point?
Well, he come back to Guadalcanal, and I have to see here.
And that's where the two photographs on 11th of June.
Oh, he told Uncle Merle that he would send him a copy of it, and he did. He sent him a copy the next couple days, and of course Merle was killed in the meantime, and Nat Bellantone didn't realize that, so he, at any rate, the pictures was forwarded on to my grandmother, and she took little paintings, little copies of it, and had it enlarged to a local artist, and they wrote condolences back and forth for a few years, which I have those letters. And then whenever I located him in 1998, he was very excited about meeting me. He said, now the circle has been completed. Him and Merle became good friends over this, and I sort of brought back good memories for him. Now,
Let's go on to Merle's last really flight. So that was up in the Bougainville campaign, and do you want to go into that a little bit in the fourth phase?
Well,
VP 54.
there's one fellow we forgot to mention in here. He was a co-pilot for Merle. He was Elliot Schrader. He was on a 10-day R&R and in Sydney, Australia. And Merle would have been on that 10-day R&R with him because they went over at the same time. But the bad case of malaria that he had and sent to Auckland, his commander figured that was his vacation time, so to speak, or his rest time. So he wouldn't let him go. So when they assigned another a co-pilot to Merle, whenever they were flying on a mission on November 6th and 7th, the fatal crash, Elliot would have been with him, but as I said, he was on his 10-day R&R, and when he came back, then he realized that he lost the whole crew, all his friends, and Merle also. So that was on November 6th and 7th, the final flight.
Basically, he was covering a convoy, and it was made up of LSTs, APDs. Escort, there were 6 destroyers, and the Phillips, the Shaw, the Walter, Elton. Now he was covering a convoy of LSTs, APDs, and 6 destroyers. And one of those destroyers would later play an important role in Merle's what happened to Merle. So can you want to go into that story?
Well, as I mentioned, he went out on around 10 o'clock on November 6th, 1943, and it was during the invasion of Bougainville, which started on November 1st, 1943. And one of his jobs that night was he had a spotter on board from one of the ships below, which was Task Force 39 again. And as they were flying in circles, the spotter was radio contact with the ships below. And what they were doing was softening the beach at Bougainville by shooting into the beach over the Marines that just invaded. And as they softened the beach, the Marines were able to move on into the island, the invasion. And Merle was flying at an altitude, I'm not sure, around 500 feet, whenever the spotter wanted to take a break, because they were already up there for over 13 hours. The spotter took a break, and he went forward for a cup of coffee, and when Hank Evans sat down in the seat where the blister was, where the machine gun was, he dozed off, and the next thing he remembered was he woke up and the plane floor was above his head, and he doesn't remember anything of what happened. But Brazil, the one we showed there in the picture, he popped up out of the water, and he says, "We got to get out of here. We're shot down." And he got a lifeboat, and they got out through one of the blisters, inflated the life raft, and floated around the plane, which was on fire, trying to see if there was any other survivors, and there wasn't. So they stayed right at the plane, right there at the fire for quite a while. And about 4 o'clock in the morning, a ship pulled up beside them, and they ducked down in the life raft. They were afraid it was a Japanese destroyer. So they heard a dog barking, and at that point they knew it was an American destroyer. The Japs wouldn't have a dog on board. If they did, they'd eat it. So at any rate, they hollered ahoy to the ship, and the ship's guys picked them up out of the water and took them to a nearby base where they were picked up later on.
Now, there's a discrepancy here with the Navy said and what happened in reality. I believe the Navy said that it was a downdraft, and but the weather conditions didn't say that was happening.
No, we researched archives in Washington, D.C., and there was no weather reports, strong weather downdrafts at that particular time. One of the other pilots spotted the fire at, I'm trying to think of his name, Fred Gage. Fred Gage spotted the fire 25 miles to the east. So if there would have been a storm, he was too busy to go over and look at it, but if there would have been a storm, he would have never seen it. But yes, they said that there was a downdraft from a storm. His wingtip caught in the water, and he crashed, and the plane caught on fire. That was the story.
Now, let's go into what really happened. Do you want to go into that?
Well, it's a long story on how this come about, but in my hometown, there was a fella that was on the USS Renshaw, and we got to talking about this particular incident. And he said that he was on the Renshaw that night. I interviewed him. And he said that he was on the Renshaw, and he was a gun captain on a 5-inch gun, and he was one of the ones that was helped shooting. And the whole task force opened up on him at that time. But he said he remembers shooting down that plane, thinking it was a Japanese plane. And again, Merle had the IFF off with the calling in a weather report or whatever he was doing. And they couldn't identify him, so they shot him down. And that fella here, come to find out, lived in our community, and he never realized that he shot down a member of his community like that.
So the two survivors, they managed to make it out and made it back. How far did they go back? To the state or to Hawaii, or did they come all the way back to the States at that time?
Oh no, they picked him up. They picked him up at an island. One of the, I don't recall the pilot. It may have been Willie Sneed. Picked them up and flew them back to base. And just as simple as that, they reassigned him. And he went on. They went on in their lives in the Navy until the war was over and they got out.
At this time, is there anything that you would like to add about Merle? We're going to show his medals here. And that's his medals that he received. I don't know if you...
Merle was a wonderful young man. He just, he helped his mother at home. As I said before about his musical ability, he was very good in school. Everybody just loved him.
Yeah, he was very, reading the background to this, he was a very talented individual, you know, who, if coming out, would have made it out of the service, would have done something with his life. He was just reading the back material. He was a very interesting person.
Yes.
At this time, I would like to thank you. Oh yeah, on the map, we do have his location, and there was a research vessel that was going out to reclaim the bodies, and at least reclaim the site as a military burial site. And it was too deep, I understand, for the research vessel to send anything down to find any remains.
Right, through the 90s, they have well, it's still going on today. They're recovering bodies and downed airplanes, some at sea and some on the ground. But they were interested in this. In fact, they asked me if I could go on a spur of the moment. This was the Navy Department down at the archives. If I could go on the spur of the moment, if they decided to go investigate this crash site. I said yes, I would. I'd be able to go anytime. Well, somewhere in the 90s, I don't have it documented, I don't think, I may, but they called me and said a fishing vessel give them a report on the depth at that coordinates, and it said that it was 5,000 meters deep, which I think I have it calculated as a little over 3 miles. So that shot the idea of trying to have any kind of recovery. My aunts, they took the test for DNA. I have 2 aunts that was living back then, and they went to doctors. The Navy sent them a kit, and they did the DNA and also my DNA in case they ever would recover any bones from that plane. They would have proper DNA to track them back.
Thank you very much for the interview.
You're welcome. One of the things that I've tried to find out in my research here is the guy's names that was on the plane that night of the crash. And I've never been able to find out and find any families of these men. And of course, we've got Brazil that survived it, and he died before I started my research. And Hank Evans, which I've met and talked to, and he has died. But I've never been able to find, here's one here, Richard Jicka. And he replaced Elliot Schrader when they flew on that, when Elliot went on his 10-day R&R. Richard Jicka was the co-pilot that night and lost his life. Bridges, Whitney Bridges is his name. He's an ensign, he was a navigator. Another one was David Robbins, and he was also a navigator. He lost his life. John Christensen, again, he was a airman, first class, I guess, U.S. Navy. Robert Stewart, second class, U.S. Navy, lost his life. Robert Stewart. And William White, second class. And Robert McBride. My records show that Robert McBride was the spotter that was on the ship that night. So I'm not sure about that one. I'd like to, any family members that could that sees this tied in with that crash of Lieutenant Shaw on 7 November 1943. It would be nice if I could get in contact with them.